I started this by asking my followers one simple question: which Fallout New Vegas DLC is the best in your opinion? And the answers were, just like any other time this question is asked, mixed. Ask any person who's played Fallout New Vegas what their favorite DLC is, and you'll probably get a different answer each time. And I think that really reflects the quality of these expansions. It's not very common for a game to not only have a fully realized core experience, along with count them, 4 high-quality DLC add-ons that introduce new areas, characters, weapons, and stories to discover these days. So I thought it'd be cool and fun to play through and rank all these DLCs, as it had been a while since I last played them, and when I did play them back in the day as a young lad on my now fossilized Xbox 360. Most of the themes and stories of these DLCs went way over my head anyway, so today, I'll be ranking these DLCs from worst to best. Don't worry, these are all good expansions in my opinion. I could glaze this game and its expansions for days. This is just a competition between them to see who is the best. I'll go through each add-on in order of release, that's Dead Money, to Honest Hearts, to Old World Blues, to Lonesome Road. Some may argue for swapping Dead Money and playing Honest Hearts first due to Dead Money sharing an overarching story with the other DLCs, while Honest Hearts remains mostly separate from the others. But for simplicity's sake and consistency with the developers, I'll just go by order of release. After looking over all the expansions, I'll then rank them to determine which is the true DLC god of the pack. These are all my opinion, so don't take any of these rankings seriously as doctrine. Let's get this shit. DLC number 1, Dead Shmoney. The first and by far most controversial of the group is the first expansion released for New Vegas, Dead Money. Ask anyone who's played it, and they'll either tell you they love the unique gameplay, deep and tragic story, and interesting characters, or they'll tell you they absolutely hate the spongy enemies, brutal traps and hazards, and unorthodox game design. Who's telling the truth here? Well, is the DLC shit or not? Let's get into it. After answering the call of a mysterious radio broadcast advertising the opening of a casino where you can let go and begin again, you'll be hearing these phrases often, Dead Money sees our courier incapacitated, kidnapped, and shipped off to the Sierra Madre, a massive opulent casino and resort complex situated near the Grand Canyon. Built by old world businessman Frederick Sinclair shortly before the bombs dropped, the Sierra Madre was installed with technological wonders such as the one of the 2 new enemy types, the holograms, as well as special vending machines that can use Sierra Madre themed poker chips to fabricate items such as food, medicine, clothes, and weapons from the materials in the chips, making the Madre fully self-sufficient. However, in order to obtain these technologies in the first place, old Frederick had to make a few shady deals with the creators of the technology themselves, the R&D defense contractor Big Empty. Big Empty is a very important entity not only in the DLCs, but also in the base game, with creatures like the Cazadors, which are roided up killer wasps, fuck these things, and the Night Stalkers, dogs with large grafted rattlesnake heads and tails, fuck these things too, being created by the Big Empty, but we'll get more into that in Old World Blues. With old Freddy allowing them to use the Sierra Madre complex to field test technologies such as the Cloud, a corrosive toxic gas that appears as a misty red hepatitis cloud that now engulfs the Madre, along with a hazmat suit designed specifically for the Cloud, which unfortunately for Sinclair were shit at their one job, with the Cloud corroding the metal locks on the suits, trapping the workers inside of them. With further exposure to the Cloud causing their skin and flesh to merge and fuse together with the suit, denigrating them into the new enemy type, the shambling ghost people we see plug walking throughout the desolate villa. Despite these troubles, along with other financial issues with construction on the villa area, Sinclair continued building his casino, as he knew nuclear war with China was inevitable, so going broke wasn't an issue for him, as money wouldn't matter after the bombs dropped and killed everyone who was using it as currency. Along with the futuristic technology, he had also designed the Sierra Madre to be a fortress that could withstand the nuclear apocalypse. His true goal with the casino being to protect the love of his life and the voice of the Sierra Madre broadcast, old world movie star Vera Keyes. If nuclear war were to happen, the casino would hermetically seal shut, the security holograms would activate, and the survivors would all be safe inside to wait out the fallout, using their vending machines and stockpiles to sustain themselves. However, something went wrong when the nukes started dropping. Sinclair went missing, the security holograms went berserk, killing all the guests within the casino, and the Cloud had started seeping out from within the cheap ventilation systems and eventually covered the entire complex, keeping it preserved for the next 200 years. And that's where we start this DLC. After waking up, we are greeted by this flickering projection of an old man. This is Father Elijah, a brilliant but cruel and a bit cracked out former Brotherhood of Steel elder who we heard about in the base game. Elijah had led his Brotherhood chapter to capture and occupy the solar power plant Helios 1 in an attempt to harness the power of Archimedes 2, a giant satellite experimental death ray weapon from before the war. Easier said than done though, as the NCR, whom the Brotherhood was currently at war with, also wanted to take Helios to use as a source of much needed energy for the local NCR military operations in the Mojave. The Brotherhood of Steel and NCR fought each other for control of Helios, with the Brotherhood slowly losing ground to the endlessly attacking NCR troops. With time running out and Elijah still unable to activate and use the Archimedes 2 death ray, he abandoned his chapter and escaped into the night in search of alternative technologies that could destroy his dreaded NCR ops with, eventually leading him here to the Sierra Madre. After waking you, Elijah tells you he's got you by the balls and that he's got plans for you. He's planning a heist of the Sierra Madre's vault, and he needs your help along with 3 others in order to pull it off properly, as the Sierra Madre is locked up tighter than femcel pussy and requires a team of people and a specific sequence of actions to get inside. In order to force you into compliance, Elijah has strapped a bomb collar to your neck and to the necks of your teammates, and if one goes off, everyone dies. This bomb collar being a major aspect of Dead Money's gameplay. Elijah warns you of the dangers of the Sierra Madre, like the previously mentioned hepatitis cloud, the ghost people, the holograms, and the most vile of them all, the radios. You see, the collars were designed to detonate when they receive a certain frequency, and the Madre is littered with old radios and speakers that just so happen to be emitting a frequency that can set the collars off. And if you're too close to a radio for too long, head go boom. And Elijah was unable to fix this issue. Thanks for nothing, asshole. So with our tasks received and warnings issued, we can finally get to work. Dead Money strips you down to start. To begin, you're only given a hollow rifle to defend yourself with. Dead Money is definitely the most unique DLC of the pack, as its gameplay is very different in both approach and pace compared to the base game. Dead Money takes the Fallout mechanics and repackages it into a survival horror-esque experience. Weapons, ammo, and healing supplies are limited, forcing the player to scrounge as much as they can for any supplies and Sierra Madre chips strewn about the nightmarish villa, and to be mindful of your own resources in each enemy encounter. Dead Money makes a great first impression. The cramped maze-like villa paired with the dark red air surrounding you makes the atmosphere feel downright oppressive, with the monolithic Sierra Madre casino looming over you at all times. They were taking good notes from Silent Hill on this one. You'll find yourself exploring and looting the villa as much as you can, and this introduction works great to really set the game's hooks into you. As you head for your first teammate, you'll run into one of the new enemy types, the aforementioned ghost people. The ghost people appear to be zombies, mindlessly shambling through the villa until provoked. When they engage you in combat, they jump and jerk around at lightning quick speeds, making them very hard to hit in the heat of battle, and they attack you just as fast, swiping and lunging at you in animations that have less frames than when I was trying to play Overworld Blues with my CPU melting down. I'll explain later. Not only that, but the ghost people can also throw large gas bombs and throwing spears at you as well, making them both close and range threats. Especially the gas bomb throwers. Holy hell, these guys can be devastating if you aren't careful. The ghost people force you to approach each enemy encounter with a plan of attack, and serve very well as a survival horror type enemy. Finally, when you manage to knock a ghost down, that doesn't mean it's over. Ghost people can only be killed if one of their extremities are crippled or destroyed, and will quickly get back up if not dealt with. An interesting idea and concept, having to brutalize your enemy to fully kill them, but luckily for us, these guys are pretty brittle. Knock them down with the hollow rifle and then pull out a melee weapon and quarter them while they're down. Simple as. Sometimes if you get a crippling or critical shot on them, it destroys the body part of the ghost before they lose all their health, allowing you to kill them earlier. I've only had a few occasions where they would get back up, but that was usually limited to dealing with multiple ghost enemies at once, and even then it's still pretty manageable. Arriving at our destination introduces the new radio mechanic to the player. Stand within range of the radio and your collar will start to beep. Stay in range too long and your dome gets blown. Exit the radio range and the timer ends and resets. Radios can either take the form of the standing radios you can interact with to turn off, or wall-mounted radios that can either be destroyed with a projectile, or are marked red and have to be shut off via terminal. I'm a bit torn on the radio mechanic. I love the absolute ass-clenching tension it can bring when you're hurriedly moving through the corridors looking for the source or a safe spot, but at the same time, I've had more than a few annoying deaths with the radios, and it can very easily just evolve into a trial and error run to find the source, and the tension gets lost because of that. Also, this is just a personal nitpick, but I absolutely hate the "your caller started/stopped beeping" alert messages you get. The messages linger for way too long, and they quickly fall behind the current beeping status. You can run through an active radio area, and your caller can start and stop beeping in the time it takes for the first message to go away. This could be fixed by having the message appear at the same time the caller starts or stops beeping, and having it overwrite the current message. But as it stands in game, ignore the message pop-ups and only listen to the beeping to determine your current status, as the messages will only confuse you. Here we also meet one of our 3 teammates, Dog and God. He is a Nightkin, which are schizophrenic super mutants with dark purple skin and has split personalities. Dog, his violent beast-like side that takes orders from his master Elijah, and God, his intelligent and rational side that wants out of his arrangement with Elijah. After clearing out the police station, you can either choose to free Dog or God, each offering you a different perk. Each of the companions offer you a perk when they're with you that provide a buff against one of the new mechanics of dead money. Dog will devour downed ghost people, making them easier to kill, and God will prevent the player from triggering traps as well as giving you a stealth bonus. However, God's perk is damn near useless as both Dog and God are programmed to bum rush any nearby enemies, blowing your cover in the process. As far as I know, choosing to take Dog or God out of the prison cell doesn't matter for his ending. And since God is weaker than Dog and his perk sort of defeats itself, taking Dog is your best option. I like Dog God. He's got a fittingly freaky look to him, and having him by your side gives you a nice feeling of security in this otherwise brutal place. And his split personality is handled really well, giving us 2 characters for the price of 1. With Dog collected, our next crewmate to find is the old lounge singer Dean Domino, whose posters you've probably seen throughout the base game and on the loading screens, so it's really cool to meet this character in person. On the way to find Dean, you'll have your first encounter with the Cloud, which you'll have to wade through in order to reach him. The Cloud, despite having a decent amount of lore setting it up as more than just a toxic gas, is in practice just a toxic gas. Stand in it, lose health, simple as. It's nothing you haven't seen before. You also begin to run into more and more traps, with pressure plates, bear traps, and tripwires strewn everywhere, forcing you to watch your steps carefully. You will get fucked if you try to ignore them. I made this mistake. I heard that. Get away from there, dog. What the? Jesus Christ. These traps don't play around. The explosive traps especially, they seem to have been juiced up for this expansion, as they can melt your health and cripple you from pretty solid distances. The bear traps were the worst traps for me though. I've died to these fucking bear traps an embarrassing number of times, and their placements are straight up devilish. Where are you lying looking? Dude, what?! But after a bit of trial and error, as well as watching my steps, we reach Dean. Dean is far and away the most interesting NPC in this expansion, as his story ties in directly with that of the Madres. Dean has been at the Sierra Madre since at least 2077, being present for the Great War and the downfall of the casino. And for about 204 years, he has been living amongst the ghosts and traps of the Madre, and breathing in the all-surrounding hepatitis gas for that long probably isn't that good for you. And when you finally meet him, he isn't what you thought he'd be like. Dean isn't the cool and friendly lounge singer that he portrays himself as. He's a vindictive, arrogant thug. The first thing he tells you is that he's got a bomb under your ass that he isn't afraid to blow up, and later on, in order to get his, quote, good ending, you have to play along and glaze him to make him think he's in control of the situation. But I'll talk more about this later. We recruit Dean and head for our final crewmate, Christine Royce. By this time, you'll probably have collected a bunch of Sierra Madre chips. These chips are used in the vending machines, this DLC's store system. To start out, you can only make fairly inconsequential purchases, such as pretty useless food or clothes, but you can find holotapes throughout the DLC that unlock more useful items such as chems and, more importantly, stim packs. I mostly use these vending machines solely for stim packs, and only occasionally to convert cigarette tins into chips for, you guessed it, more stim packs. This stim pack tape is located in the clinic, along with Christine and the second new enemy type, the security holograms, the evil version of the other holograms we've seen at the fountain and some other spots in the villa so far. The holograms are a sort of enemy trap hybrid. They cannot be physically damaged and can only be defeated by turning off their emitters with a repair skill check or just destroying them outright with damage. These checks aren't easy either. They get harder as you progress through the Madre, and towards the end of the DLC you'll have to have a repair level of 100 to disable the holograms. And since shooting the emitters accomplishes the same goal, just shooting them is always the better solution. Since they can't be harmed physically, and their lasers do massive damage, hologram encounters are always stealth-based. Since they are holograms, they can only see in front of them, so sneaking by them isn't really based on your actual sneak skill, which is nice for those of us who don't level sneak in Fallout New Vegas often. These holograms, like most of the other traps in this game, can be both hit or miss depending on the context. The first encounter with one in the clinic is actually very good, showing you how to manipulate their positions via terminal and how to neutralize the emitter while avoiding line of sight is tense and rewarding. However, later on, as they pop up more and more, they start feeling less and less threatening. You can oftentimes just blow right by them with some quick movements, as they struggle to follow you around corners or past obstacles. They're pretty sedentary. It's here in the clinic that we finally meet our third and final crewmate, Christine, who has been shoved into an autodoc pod and has been rendered mute and scarred by its operations on her. It's definitely an interesting idea to have Christine be non-verbal and have to signal and sign to communicate, with all of her speech options being descriptions of her movements and subtle signs. But in execution, it falls flat, as you read about all the actions and subtle movements she's doing to communicate with you, all the while her model on screen just stands there doing the mannequin challenge. A bit awkward for sure, but nothing I can't forgive is just a limitation of the engine. We collect Christine and return to the fountain with the whole squad assembled. We return to Elijah's floating mugshot, and he tells us that in order to get into the casino, we need to trigger something called the Gala event, which requires the help of all the 3 misfits we have just collected, and we now have to bring them to their designated spots in order to trigger it. This part is sort of an inverse of the first part of this DLC. We first went out to collect the characters, now we gotta go put them back in their correct spots. This section of the DLC is an extension of the first part, having to deal with more enemies and traps as we move deeper into the villa. This part is where I believe Dead Money strikes its best balance. The ghost people become more numerous, but you also have more options for dealing with them, such as having other weapons besides the hollow rifle like pistols, throwing spears, and gas bombs. There are more places to explore, but exploration is dangerous and can lead you to losing massive chunks of health if you aren't careful. I was getting shredded by bear traps. You can make a compilation of me getting wrecked by these fucking things. These ghost people have impeccable troll trap placement abilities. I also found myself spending almost all of my Madre trips that I had scrounged from containers and fountains buying up stim packs, and I ended up getting just enough to make it through this part. It was tense and engaging, and probably where Dead Money shines brightest, at least gameplay wise. So we lead all our companions to their spots, they bitch and moan about it, we placate them, then we kick off the Gala event, following some interesting technical difficulties. 14 health. Oh, or that could happen. Or this can happen. Alright. We head back to the plaza, dodging and offing some ghost people along the way, and into the newly opened casino. We walk into the casino, get knocked out, wake up, and learn that all of our companions have also been brought into the casino. How convenient. However, Elijah tells us that before we can get into the vault of the Sierra Madre, we have to deal with all 3 of them first. This is the third and final part of the DLC involving our companions, and this is where we can determine their endings. After turning the power back on and dodging some holograms, losing a little bit of time along the way, we move to deal with Dog first. Dog and God are fighting for control of their body, and Dog has locked himself in the Sierra Madre's kitchen and has also busted open a bunch of gas valves, filling the kitchen with flammable gas that would burn down the entire casino if ignited, which is exactly what Dog will do if he spots you, so be careful. We trap him in dialogue so he doesn't ISIS our ass, and with some silver-tongued riz, we get Dog to calm down and go to sleep, and let God take control, concluding his story. Although Dog and God don't have the richest backstory, I ended up really liking this character. He fits perfectly into the themes and the setting of the DLC, and he was compelling enough to make me want to help him out and give him the best ending possible. 1 down, 2 to go. Up next, Dean Domino in the Tampico Theater. Moving through to the theater to get Dean is where unfortunately the traps and hazards start to reach their breaking point, from tense survival situations to trial and error annoyances in my opinion. In order to get to Dean, we have to activate a hologram of his performance while dodging security holograms and radio signals at the same time, and I wasted more than a few minutes getting my head blown off by the radio searching for the path forward. Within the Tampico Theater are indestructible radios visible all along the walls, which confuse me as to where is safe and where isn't safe. Turns out if you stand in the middle of the theater, that's far enough away from the radios to be safe, but being able to see them all along the walls was throwing me off. In any case, we activate a music stand, get a key, Dean jump scares us from backstage, and tells us the way forward. We move through the dressing rooms, dealing with more radios along the way, which were a tad more annoying than engaging unfortunately, dodge some holograms and fire up the Dean concert to clear them out. Then we finally speak to Dean. Dean's ending will be entirely dependent on how the player treated him when they first met in the villa. If you pass the barter skill check with him, that'll automatically lock you into a bad ending, as Dean will try to kill you at this point due to him being suspicious of you. Luckily for me, I missed this check and was able to actually speak with him and learn some more information about what went down at this casino over 200 years ago. Dean tells us that he had cooked up a scheme with Vera Keys to rob Sinclair's vault in the depths of the Madre and to completely break his heart by having Vera be complicit in this scheme. Dean even personally introduced Vera to Sinclair, feeling his obsession with her. Why did Dean want to completely destroy this man both financially and emotionally? Because, according to Dean, he was arrogant. Apparently. Dean thinks that Sinclair thought that he was better than him and had constructed the Sierra Madre as a monument to his fat ego and arrogance and a big middle finger to guys like Dean. Which says way more about Dean than it does Sinclair. However, the heist failed when Vera, overburdened with guilt, confessed to Sinclair and told him everything about the plot, which kicked off the Madre's true downfall. Dean is vindictive and jealous to the point of psychopathy, and has spent the last 200 years living in this hellscape fueled only by his spite and his never-ending coping and seething over his failed revenge heist. In my opinion, the best and most fitting ending for Dean would be for him to die at the hands of the courier, unable to let go, see what I did there, of his rage and greed, finally falling to someone that he had underestimated. But in this playthrough, I kept him alive, which allows him to finally leave the Madre and begin again. Did it again. Which may be for better or for worse. We also learned from Dean that he was the one who had put Christine in the autodoc pod and had done so in order to operate on her vocal cords so that her voice matched Vera's voice. This is because the only way to access the vault is through an elevator in Vera's room, and the elevator can only be accessed with a code spoken by Vera. So off we go to the suites to meet with Christine and finally get into the vault. Now's a good time to explain the rest of the story of the Madre and what actually happened the day the bombs fell. Before her confession, Sinclair had found out about the plot to hit a lick on his ass, so in a rage, he started making modifications to his vault. He had redesigned it to become a trap, and if Dean and Vera were to get into the vault, it would have permanently sealed them inside of it, condemning them to die an ironic death amongst the treasures of the vault. However, after Vera's confession, Sinclair was devastated, but didn't want Vera to die. So he returned to the vault in an attempt to undo the booby trapping he did to it, but tragically stubbed his toe or something whilst walking along the pipes near the vault, fell, and died from the poisonous hepatitis gas that had seeped in from the shitty ventilation system, with his corpse remaining sealed near the vault in the depths of the Madre. After this happened, the holograms began slaughtering the guests, and Vera, unable to cope with the situation, overdosed on Med-X and died with the rest of the casino, writing her final message, "Let go," on the wall of her room. God damn, that's heavy. Back to the game. We travel to the suites to find Christine and do some more radio and hologram dodging, having to avoid the hologram of Vera Keyes, who constantly repeats her last moments alive, pleading with a long-gone Sinclair and lamenting her betrayal of him, which is just extremely eerie and depressing. In theory. The corridors and rooms of the suites are very small and cramped, making it very easy for the hologram to spot you. And as a terrible stealth player, this eerie moment loses a lot of impact when you're listening to it over and over again while running and panicking from the Vera hologram after your cover gets blown. Minus these antics after you get spotted, this is an otherwise excellent moment in the DLC. Her room has these sweet looking red windows and the atmosphere is just palpable. It's really well done. In Vera's room, we meet up with Christine, who can talk again. With this newfound power, we learn that she is a member of the Brotherhood of Steel and has pursued Elijah in order to kill him, not only as her orders, but also as a personal vendetta against him from separating her from her lesbian lover Veronica. She also does some teasing for later DLCs. But we talk her down and get her to let go of her lust for revenge against Elijah and to let us handle it, and we use her new Vera voice to unlock the elevator and get to the final section of the DLC. Christine is probably the weakest of the characters in this DLC, as she doesn't speak for most of it, and she only has 2 possible endings depending on whether if you were nice or mean to her, and it's probably the easiest good ending to get. But overall, her place in the story is still very interesting, and I do like the effort the devs put in to have a mostly silent character, and still have her be mostly compelling and effective. After that, we get into the vault area, and it's here where they save the most devious traps for last. The radios are everywhere and the holograms are patrolling all over, and my head was getting liquefied pretty often in my last hour of gameplay. By this time, the radios had fully lost any tension, and had just become a sort of trial and error puzzle where I was parkouring around to beat the radio timers. The holograms didn't fare much better, as after trying to sneak past them to get to the required terminals to open the path forward, I eventually just started blowing past the holograms to get around. As if one sees you, but you're able to round a corner or get behind a wall, they don't move much to pursue you. I began to not fear them at all, just running by them as I tried to get to the vault. After digging around and not realizing that the force field was controlled by a terminal option hidden within another terminal option, some negative IQ gameplay here, we finally get into the vault. The vault is probably the most famous part of the DLC, and for good reason. I see why Dean wanted to hit a lick on this place so bad. On top of tons of ammunition, on a table are 36 gold bars worth 10,547 caps each. Shit, son. But we will get back to those. For now, we call down Elijah with some Riz action, and when he arrives, you can either pack his ass or sneak around him and seal him in the vault in an ultimate act of irony. Me and my chat tried to sneak past him, but I couldn't get it to work, as it seems to be pretty finicky and you'll need a sneak skill of 100 to make it work effectively. Apparently there is a stealth boy in the vault that can help with this, but I couldn't find it for the life of me. And I ended up just killing Elijah after a quick scuffle. After his death, a countdown triggers and you have to run all the way back to the entrance before your head goes boom. Time to grab those gold bars, and they weigh 35 pounds each. Shit! And if you try to take all the gold bars, the over-encumbrance would make escaping impossible. Very, very cheeky, devs. In these last moments of the DLC, the devs also force the player to do a little letting go, and forcing them to accept that they cannot take all this shmoney with them, a moment I absolutely love. Although you can cheese this by looting Elijah's corpse through a wall, or loading up all the gold bars onto a part of his body and then carrying it all the way to the exit. But these are all completely unintentional. And with 4 gold bars in my back pocket, we make our escape and complete Dead Money. Overall, Dead Money is a really solid start to these DLCs. The unique design of the DLC really distinguishes it from the others, for better or for worse. I'd say the new hazards and design choices are effective 70% of the time, with the other 30% being when the hazards just become more of an annoyance than anything else, and begin to feel more like trial and error puzzles rather than tense survival situations. Besides these design hiccups, the atmosphere is oppressive and tells one of the most solemn and engrossing stories in the entire Fallout franchise that's still highly regarded today. And with that, we move on to DLC number 2, Honest Hearts. DLC number 2, Honest Hearts. I feel like Honest Hearts is the odd one out of these DLCs. Dead Money, Old World Blues, and Lonesome Road all share an overarching plot and characters that reference each other in each DLC, whereas Honest Hearts is mostly removed from that overarching story and is pretty much wholly self-contained. Honest Hearts also returns to the open world design of the base game that we are all familiar with, this time taking us to the fairly untouched paradise of Zion National Park. It's time to get honest. Honest Hearts starts with the courier answering a call for curious travelers to join the Happy Trails Caravan, a trading caravan that is set to travel to Zion to try and re-establish contact with their trading partner, the Mormon-ran settlement of New Canaan. After speaking with Jed Masterson about the job and speaking with Ricky, a great little NPC who has some pretty funny dialogue and speech checks you can roast him with, I stripped down to 100 pounds of carry weight as the DLC forces you to only be carrying 75 pounds, which can be raised to 100 with a few checks. This forces your character to be a little short of resources when you arrive, but don't worry, the DLCs get less and less restrictive as we go along. And with my courier less encumbered, we strike out towards Zion. Now we learn a little bit more backstory about New Canaan from Jed, along with legends of the Burned Man. When Caesar's Legion was starting out in Arizona, Caesar had a right-hand man, his Malpais legate, a New Canaanite named Joshua Graham. New Canaan was a Mormon-led settlement near the former Salt Lake City, and Joshua was raised as a man of faith. Josh and Caesar were tearing up Arizona, conquering tribes and bringing them into the Legion fold. During these campaigns, Joshua Graham gained a ferocious reputation as a brutal commander and a stone-cold killer, committing atrocities against the tribes the Legion was beginning to steamroll over in their conquests, which flew directly in the face of his pious and peaceful beliefs, making him a complicated and conflicted man. This conquering continued until the Legion ran into the new California Republic as they expanded west into the Mojave, culminating in the First Battle of Hoover Dam, where Joshua made his first and last mistake, when the NCR was able to draw his most experienced legionaries into Boulder City, where the NCR had laid a trap, destroying the Malpais legate's troops with explosives planted throughout the town. With the bulk of his army shredded and thrown into chaos, the NCR forced Joshua back over the dam in a convincing defeat. Caesar was proper fuming, unable to accept failure, even from his longtime partner and legate of his armies. Caesar had Joshua doused in pitch, lit on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon in a display of ultimate disapproval. Despite being lit on fire and being essentially thrown off of a skyscraper, Joshua had survived the incident. He must have been spamming stimpaks on the way down. He crawled out of the Grand Canyon and walked an arduous 400 miles back home to New Canaan, oozing skin and having to constantly replace his full body bandages along the way. Not long after, the legend of the Burned Man had begun to spread around the wasteland, haunting Caesar as an echo of his greatest failure, banning any mention of his name or his new alias as the Burned Man. We then arrive in Zion, which is probably the most visually unique area out of any Fallout game. I really like the idea of having a Fallout setting take place in a national park, and it's a nice departure from the usual piss-filtered concrete diarrhea that we see for 90% of the base game. Although it's not totally perfect, as the graphics of Zion haven't aged the best. But I can forgive a 13-year-old game for missing the mark on one of the most naturally beautiful places on Earth. And as far as we're concerned, it gets the job done well. Very shortly after arriving in Zion, shit starts getting pretty hairy. Tribal raiders from the White Legs tribe begin attacking our caravan, and poor Jed and Ricky's heads pop off like balloons from the gunfire. I think their heads are literally scripted to explode, insta-killing them. Damn, it's a raw deal for an NPC. We push through and fight off the White Leg attackers until we meet a friendly tribal, a young buck named Follows Chalk. He belongs to the Dead Horses tribe, who are led by Joshua Graham, who they revere as a great leader. We follow Chalk, you could say, and we get a better lay of the land. I like Follows Chalk as a companion. His voice acting is actually really well done. He comes off as a bit nervous yet very personable and helpful, just through the performance alone. We continue following Chalk until we reach their camp, and after checking in with two bears high-fiving and zukaing...
Auslander Zuka Joshua Graham?
What? We can finally meet the man himself, Joshua Graham, who is endlessly working on and inspecting and reloading an unchanging pile of pistols. Looks like that might take him a while. From speaking with Joshua, we learn that these attacking Whitelegs have destroyed New Canaan under Caesar's orders. The warlike Whitelegs desperately want to join the Legion, and Caesar, seeing an opportunity to rid himself of his greatest mistake once and for all, made a deal with them that if they could destroy New Canaan and kill Joshua Graham for good, they'd be allowed to join the Legion. which explains their presence in Zion, as many of the survivors of New Canaan had fled to Zion to seek help from Joshua, who was working with and leading the dead horses by then. Joshua says he can help us leave Zion if we can help him first, a classic video game transaction. Joshua and another New Canaanite, Daniel, are currently trying to evacuate the tribals and survivors out of Zion Canyon, and they need some supplies to pull this off, such as a compass, food, and walkie-talkies. So we get to work. This is the point in which, unfortunately, this expansion starts to fall flat. The quests given to you by Joshua are fetch quests in their purest form, tasking you with going to the marked location, finding the item in question, picking it up, and that's it. No extra steps or rigmarole to get the items. They're that easily accessible. Pick up the compass, pass an easy repair check or fix with spare parts, quest complete. Go to the fishing lodge, get a key, get the walkie-talkies, quest complete. Go to the ranger station, pick up the marked lunchboxes, quest complete. I'm hard pressed to call these quests, and if you even rolled them all into one quest, it's still extremely simple. All the skill checks needed to complete the quest are pretty easy too, being around level 30 to pass the relevant medicine and repair checks. Anyway, with the supplies in hand, we head to meet with Daniel and the other friendly tribe in Zion, the Sorrows. We meet first with the other companion this DLC introduces, Waking Cloud. Although she's not as interesting as Fall's Chalk, I find her character to be genuine enough to still be somewhat appealing, behind some more good voice acting and writing. Waking Cloud also tells us a bit about her tribe, and that they worship a father in the caves, that I'll circle back to. But for now, we talk to Daniel, who tasks us with getting a map of the Grand Staircase region, as well as fending off the White Legs and their traps. We pick up Waking Cloud on the way out, and after downloading a mod to fix an issue with Joshua not talking to me... Yeah, come to me, bro, come here. Okay, Oh, Josh, bro, you're fucking glitched. What's wrong with you?
Welcome back.
We speak to him after he came running for us. He recites a goated Bible verse and then tells us about his take on the current situation. Joshua came all this way to the Sorrows camp because he has decided that he wants to fight off the White Legs and defend Zion, rather than retreat. This flies in the face of Daniel's position, who wants to evacuate the Sorrows and others out of Zion to preserve their innocence and to avoid bloodshed at all costs. The game presents both sides here to give us some time to make a choice on the issue while we're doing our quests. This second round of quests, despite being a bit more in depth, also fail to impress. They involve you either killing a few White Legs, disarming traps in a specified location, or killing Yao Guai bears and blowing up their cave after a short walkthrough. The only real notable quest involves getting the Grand Staircase map and leads you through a cave that once belonged to a lone survivor, and on his terminal we can find some interesting logs. This is the father of the caves that the Sorrows worship, and his story is an absolute gem, providing some much needed development for the Sorrows tribe. As the White Legs and dead horses have almost nothing going for them, at least lore-wise, with the dead horses being a mostly peaceful but combat-capable tribe, and the White Legs just being essentially raiders. The father in the caves is the survivalist, a man named Randall Clark, an ex-soldier and outdoorsman who had taken refuge in Zion after the bombs fell, and you can find his story scattered across terminals in the caves of Zion. His story is incredibly well written and engaging, detailing Randall's struggles surviving the initial bombings, his struggles with the death of his family and survivor's guilt, the subsequent fallout and weather disasters, and his one-man war against an invading group of Vault 22 dwellers, as well as guardianship of a group of children who had wandered into Zion, those children eventually becoming the Sorrows tribe, with them revering Randall as their god, yet fearing the caves and buildings he lived in, as Randall had booby-trapped them out the ass in his conflict with the Vault dwellers, and the Sorrows had gotten spooked after one of their tribe members had died setting off one of his traps. The Sorrows marking the places as taboo that we could see decorating the caves and building entrances across Zion. His story scattered across the caves provides the main reason to explore Zion as you uncover more and more of his tragic tale, and you can actually find his corpse in a sweet DLC unique weapon called the Survivalist Rifle. I fucking love this gun. And his story. Rest easy, Randall. After completing Daniel's chores, I did the Rite of Passage quest. A fairly simple yet entertaining quest to defeat a Yao Guai while tripping balls on Datura. It's a pretty fun quest. Having your courier fight a giant mutated bear that's on fire and can make clones of itself always makes for good fun. We kill the ghost of She, and then it's time to make my choice on who to side with and begin the final stage of the quest. Yes, it's already at its apex. And the choice is pretty easy in my opinion. Joshua is obviously the better choice. I can understand Daniel's desire to avoid bloodshed and keep the Sorrows away from war, but I think bro needs to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The Fallout world is a dangerous place, and the Sorrows will eventually have to fight to some degree. Not only that, Daniel has already lost his home of New Canaan to the White Legs, and at some point he'll have to stop running. Even though the Whitelegs wouldn't be able to pursue the Sorrows into the Grand Staircase, who knows if they'd run into other dangers or enemies. Hell, even their deity wants them to fight. In his final message on his body, Randall Clark writes about how he wants the kids to be kind, yet fight back with righteous fury if they're attacked or threatened. Although they may lose their innocence and become more warlike in the process of fighting back, it still seems to be the better solution in almost every case. So we tell Daniel we're gonna help Joshua out, and he bitches and moans at us for a bit, but he ain't shit compared to Chachua Gotham. We then load into a battle with Joshua as our companion, who gives us a pretty sweet perk that makes 45 caliber pistols do more damage and be more accurate, which is much needed against the Whiteleg goons we're slaughtering. The Whitelegs, despite being homeless raiders, are pretty well strapped, holding many high level and high caliber weapons, and these guys will be tearing up your ass, so this perk is a huge buff. This section serves as a sort of end DLC combat gauntlet, forcing you to fight your way across Zion to the Whitelegs camp, mowing them down like fucking Master Chief. When you get close to the Whitelegs camp, Joshua forces you into dialogue and then disappears out of existence, and we don't see him again until the final sequence of the game. I think we need some man-ass in the game.
This is taking too long. We can't let salt upon wounds escape. I'm going to find a way around. God willing, we will finish this together.
Alhamdulillah. Oh, okay. Bro just slipped into another dimension. See ya. We fight through a short cave until we relink up with Joshua in the final scene of the game. Joshua had slipped out of this dimension to go cut off the Whitelegs' retreat, and now has taken them prisoner. He summarily executes some of the Whitelegs before turning to their leader, Salt Upon Wounds. From here you can either convince Joshua to kill him, spare him, or kill him yourself, with your choice determining Joshua's ending, which depending on your choice, will make him either become vengeful, merciful, or a mix of the two if you kill Salty Wounds yourself, with that being the ideal ending. Urged on by my chat, I tell Joshua to off General Gobbledygook, and with that, the story of Zion and the Burned Man concludes. Oh, and by the way, if you had any unfinished business with Waking Cloud, Follows Chalk, Daniel, or Joshua, you better have taken care of that before you started this final mission, as all four will completely disappear from the game after completing this quest, so be careful. Honest Hearts is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of Fallout DLCs. On one hand, it has an amazing setting and character of Joshua Graham. His lore and motivations are incredibly interesting, and he's a rare example of a character who really makes the player stop and think about what kind of man he is, and who he should be. That coupled with the god tier voice acting in his cool outfit, as well as a sweet ass pistol he gives you at the end of the DLC, I completely understand why he's such a beloved character. However, this DLC falls short with its quests and things to do, as there really isn't much at all outside of the already pretty underwhelming side quests and finding the survivors' logs and caches. It's still a quality DLC. However, it's time to move on to our third expansion, Old World Blues. DLC number 3, Old World Blues. Old World Blues is considered not only one of the best New Vegas DLCs, but also considered amongst the greatest DLCs, period. Now, is that true? Well, let's get into it. Old World Blues kicks off when you activate a peculiar downed satellite at around midnight in-game time at the Mojave Drive-In, already setting the tone of this DLC to be a nostalgic and humorous science fiction themed expansion. Activating the satellite transports you to the Big Empty, a large crater east of the Mojave that wasteland explorers believe to be completely empty, as the crater has large imposing cliffs that are hard to pass through, as well as all those who attempt to enter the Big Empty completely vanishing after entering. When we teleport there, we find that the place isn't empty at all, and is rather the site of the pre-war research and development defense company known as Big MT. Big MT is if Lockheed Martin was run by neurotic redditors rather than stone-cold businessmen, with the facility being responsible for creating some of the nastiest shit in the wasteland, such as the aforementioned Cazadors and Night Stalkers. But they also worked on other projects such as the Cyberdogs, the Cloud, vending machines and holograms from the Sierra Madre, as well as creating the fungus that turns people into spore carriers that we see in the base game and in Zion. If there's some fucked up shit that isn't natural or created by radiation, Big MT is probably behind it. We wake up on the balcony of a massive domed building and can look out over the crater and see the distant facilities. You also notice that you're in a hospital gown, and we'll find out why soon. For now though, we gotta figure out what's going on, so we head to the center of the dome, the think tank. The think tank is the central research center at Big Empty, and it's where the brains of the executive researchers of the Big Empty carry out their experiments and research, living on for hundreds of years by inserting their brains into robot bodies, also known as think tanks. Don't get confused. However, over 200 years of being a floating brain in a pod of biogel, coupled with some faulty programming of the think tank bots, has resulted in the remaining doctors getting a little funny, which we'll see soon. We meet the 5 Big MT brains: Dr. Klein, the arrogant leader, Dr. Boros, the dramatic nerd, Dr. O, the disrespected and disrespectful robotics expert, Dr. 8, the sonic expert who only speaks in unintelligible radio waves, and Dr. Dala, the human and flesh-obsessed pervert. The writing and humor is probably the most well-known aspect of this DLC, and this is for a really good reason. The think tanks are absolutely cracked out, talking as if they have dementia, schizophrenia, and syphilis all at once. And it's absolutely great. The voice acting probably shines the brightest in this DLC out of all of them. All the think tank doctors have great performances and personalities, and the writing is sharp and hilarious, although some jokes are a tad outdated. For example, when Klein starts freaking out that your feet and hands have penises on them. But the writing overall still holds up great 13 years later. Obsidian were really flexing their cleverness and really pushed the limits of Fallout's sense of humor, without it ever getting too ridiculous. We learn from Klein that we have been unwillingly operated on, having our spine and heart removed and replaced with synthetic parts. We have also been fully lobotomized, with our brains scooped out and replaced with Tesla coils. But thanks to the headshot Benny gave us before the game, the lobotomization process had an unexpected result, and we made it out with our intelligence intact. While we're talking to Klein and the rest of the doctors, we're interrupted by a transmission from Dr. Mobius, an evil think tank bot who terrorizes the other tanks with threatening transmissions and sending out robo-scorpions to harass them from his base in the Forbidden Zone, keeping the think tank cooped up in their dome out of fear of him. And unfortunately for us, Mobius has also stolen our brain, and since we are currently lobotomized, we wouldn't be able to leave the Big Mountain's force field that prevents humans without brains from leaving the crater. Klein then tasks us with helping out the think tank by recovering 3 technologies across the big empty crater that could be used to access the Forbidden Zone and take down Mobius. Those being the X2 antenna, the sonic emitter gun, and the X13 stealth suit. Before we go, we get a K9000 machine gun, a minigun type weapon with the brain of a dog attached that whimpers and barks when used. We're also given the sonic emitter gun, which the think tank forgot they had, and then Dr. A sonjaculates into it. He just got done sucking and fucking that gun.
Oh, I don't think so.
And then gives it to us, tasking us with getting a new sound to use for the gun. You can shake down the think tank through some guns and energy weapons checks for extra ammo, and after all that chatting, which can take around 20 minutes to get through, they've got quite a lot to say. The doctors love to bicker and talk over each other, extending the conversation to a pretty far degree. But the length of this chat is helped greatly by the performances and writing, so you won't even notice really. Once you're done chatting, you're finally cut loose to explore the sink and the rest of the crater. My first stop was in the sink, which serves as the player's home base and is the old room of Dr. Mobius. We can talk to the central unit, who opens up bartering for us, as well as tasks us with finding the personality units for the other furniture and machines of the sink, as Dr. Mobius was a bit of a freak, and had programmed several personalities and upgrades for his room's appliances. This is a great quest to start with, as it'll send you all over the Big Empty to collect the personality tapes and allow you to discover the interesting locations this DLC has to offer. I have one complaint with this quest though. The quest markers are given to you in waves, and you'll get around 3 to 5 markers all across the map, and once they're collected, another wave of markers will appear, and oftentimes there'll be additional tapes in a location that you had already been to, forcing you to backtrack to the location and pick up the tape you missed. I don't see why all the markers could just be placed at once, or just reduce the number of waves that the markers come in on, as all it does is work to pad out the playtime a little bit. Regardless, despite this gripe I have with it, this quest is still super enjoyable. All of the sync furniture and machines have great performances and cheeky dialogue, and it's super enjoyable to install their tapes and see what kind of wacky personality they have. Like the horny ass seed cloning machine that desperately wants your seed, to the cool DJ personality of the talking jukebox named Blind Dio Jefferson. But my favorites are Muggy and the Toaster. The voice performances are excellent, especially on Muggy, a neurotic miniature Securitron who has an addiction to cleaning coffee mugs, and the voice actor pours his dick and balls into this performance.
They programmed me to know that girl. They made me just to torture me.
And Muggy really does sound cracked the fuck out. It's great. In general, the sync's interfaces serve to provide buffs and to process objects into crafting materials for you. They're completely optional, and if you don't care or feel like restoring the sync, you don't have to, but I do recommend it just for the writing and jokes alone. We then strike out into the big empty crater, where you'll very quickly get jumped by several enemies. True to the lore about nobody returning from the big empty, the open world of the crater is pretty dangerous, which you'll become real familiar with real fast. You'll get jumped by cyber dogs, Mr. Handies, Robo-Brains, Lobotomites, Protectrons, Trauma Override Harness Skeletons, Night Stalkers, Security Bots, and of course, the fucking Robo-Scorpions. I understand why the think tank are so afraid of these fuckers. They attack in packs, and you'll usually have to fight anywhere from 3 to 7 of them at a time. Not only that, the robotic plated armor makes them very spongy, and they are very resistant to regular bullets. So your best option is to use the skeet-covered sonic emitter to fight them, as the revelation sound it's using will paralyze the scorpions on critical hits. So unless you're already strapped with a powerful energy weapon, or have armor-piercing bullets to spare, the sonic emitter is a must. The large number of enemies in the open world is a bit double-edged for me, as on one hand it fits really well what we know about the lore and dangers of the big mountain facility, but at the same time it can make traveling a bit of a slog when you're forced into multiple fairly long, resource-intensive battles when trying to explore or complete side objectives in the big empty. But this is a problem for me only around 20% of the time. Otherwise, it feels like a fair and appropriate challenge for what the DLC is going for. Getting the first technology is pretty straightforward. Go to the X2 facility, fight through it, get to the roof, grab the antenna, mash up them steely scorpions, and that's it. The X2 antenna being a unique melee weapon that does extra damage to robots and power armor, which is the case for most new weapons in this DLC. But since I don't use melee much in Fallout games, I just put it away and mostly forgot about it. Next up is to go to the X8 lab to complete the high school horror quest. I have a bit of a bone to pick with this quest, and it's kind of for the dogs. You'll see what I mean in a sec. This quest will have you running tests for Dr. Boros, which involves the courier fighting through a mock high school, collecting student entries from terminals and fighting off turrets and cyber dogs, as if you were a Chinese communist spy. Sounds fine, right? Nope. In order to fully complete this quest, you'll have to run through this high school test 4 times, twice with cyber dogs, and twice with the deadlier Night Stalkers. The high school's layout never changes. The only thing that changes is the positions of the terminals you need to access to complete the test, and they're based on which test you choose. By the time you do the test with the deadlier Night Stalkers, it'll already have gotten repetitive. Luckily though, this isn't required for the main quest, as that only requires the first 2 tests to be completed, as that opens up the quest to head towards the X13 facility to get a key that unlocks a secret test room that contains a large cyber dog named Gabe, who was Boris' pet at one point. Once we take care of Gabe and get a tape of his bark, all the while packing more Roboscorpions on the way out, the Roboscorpions love to appear at the end of quests, that will complete the main quest portion of the X8 test. As for the final test, we need to head to the X13 facility and get the Mark II stealth suit and complete an infiltration test using the suit. This suit's pretty funny. When equipped, it'll talk to you, an odd choice for a stealth suit. The stealth suit also injects you with a stim pack and med-X if you're low on health for the former, and when you enter combat for the latter, which can inadvertently get you addicted to it, which I found way more funny than annoying, because that's completely your fault if the suit gets you hooked on it. The test involves sneaking past patrolling robo-brains, and if you're spotted, you'll have to restart. And unfortunately, this is the low point of the DLC for me. I'm not a stealth player when playing New Vegas, and the test itself is slow and plodding, as you sit twiddling your thumbs waiting for the robo-brains to look the other way so you can sneak past them. I didn't even bother to complete the X13 side quest, as the advanced tests are just more of the same as before, with the reward being an upgraded stealth suit I probably wouldn't even use anyway. So please forgive me for doing this. With the stealth suit acquired, we have everything we need to return to the think tank and go confront Dr. Mobius in the Forbidden Zone. Unfortunately, before we can do that, this DLC decided to lobotomize my CPU! My game was dropping frames to an almost unplayable degree. Ooh, wow, ooh, wow, ooh, wow, oh boy, this shit is going down to like the ones. So after an hour of unscrewing and rescrewing in my heatsink fan, I was finally ready. This game made me do some science IRL. This DLC is crazy immersive. But before we go after Dr. Mobius for good, how about we do a few quests with the think tank bots? I convinced Dala to not be so ashamed of her human body fetish and allow her to gaze at us making movements and gestures while she creams herself. I helped Dr. O with using his real name. It's not an O, it's a 0. Dr. Zero. Finally figure out how to understand Dr. 8 and help Boros with remembering his feelings for his dog Gabe. This quest for Boros is an interesting one, as I believe it's the only time the Wild Wasteland trait actually makes the game harder for you. He tasks you to go to Higgs Village, a mock neighborhood that the think tank lived in when they were still human, and retrieve a bowl from Gabe's old doghouse. However, when you roll up to the doghouse, a miniature Deathclaw named Stripe will appear out of it, and Stripe doesn't fuck around. Despite his size, he's on the same level as a mother Deathclaw. Good thing Honest Hearts hooked me up with a compliance regulator, which I used to stun Stripe and take him down that way. Otherwise I'd be cooked. But not before Stripe did this. The stick. Oh, don't do that, don't do that. Oh, what's he doing? What's he doing? Oh. These quests, although short and simple, give us a better look into the tank's psyches and just how far removed they are from being actual rational humans. That, plus more opportunities to hear some great voice work and jokes, make these quests really worth it. And it was a fun challenge figuring out ways to raise my stats to pass the checks needed to complete these quests. But now, it's actually time to go after Mobius and get our brain back. We check back in with Klein, and after a quick battle with dementia, he finally realizes that the technologies we recovered can be used to get inside the Forbidden Zone. So off we go. After fighting a few more Roboscorpions along the way, we can finally enter the Forbidden Zone and take on the final boss of this expansion, a giant Roboscorpion. Fitting. The giant Robo-Scorpion hits about as hard as he is large, and can shoot off projectiles that have massive range and deal radiation damage as well. And on top of that is an absolute tank. There are several terminals around the facility you can activate to spawn in robots to help you fight it and draw away fire, or you can just do what I did, and camp behind a wall and take potshots at the Scorpion with the advanced layer until it dies. That also works. I also enjoy the open-ended nature of this fight, being able to just attack it directly or use the terminals to your advantage, although it's a little too easy to cheese out in my opinion, as the Scorpion just kinda sits in the center of the room, mostly unmoving unless it's to face its current target. With the Scorpion packed, we have nothing left standing in our way of Mobius, and we enter the Forbidden Dome to confront him. Upon meeting Mobius, however, he isn't what we expect him to be. Rather than being some cartoonish villain who wants to kill us with robo-scorpions, Mobius is more like your friendly yet extremely senile grandpa. Mobius, like the other tanks, has got that dementia, schizophrenia, and syphilis trifecta, but he also loves popping mentats and psycho, further wrecking his memory. When asked about the threatening transmissions he sent to the think tank, he says that he was just geeking on Psycho at the time and had recorded it in a haze. He also reveals some very important information about the current state of the think tank and why he swiped our brain to begin with. Originally, Mobius was a member of the think tank, but Mobius became concerned about their behavior over time. As the other doctors became more deranged and their experiments became more dangerous and depraved, he became fearful that they would eventually move out of the crater to experiment on the population of the wasteland and release even more dangerous abominations and robots into the world. Reaching his breaking point, Mobius decided to reprogram the think tank bots, making them lose their senses of time, location, and history, making them believe the crater of the Big Empty is the only place in existence. He also took on the persona of Dr. Mobius and unleashed the Robo-Scorpions across Big Mountain to keep the doctors contained in their dome, fearful of him. We also learn from Mobius the real reason as to why he snatched our brain. It turns out that due to the bullet wound in our brain that Benny so generously gave us, the Autodoc performing our lobotomy was able to upgrade itself to fix the wound as well as removing the brain, resulting in us, the first truly successful lobotomy. With this advancement in lobotomizations, the think tank could then use the data from our brain extraction, along with the technologies we recovered, to transplant their own brains into new human bodies, allowing them to pass through the radar fence and unleash scientific mayhem on the wasteland unopposed. I love this revelation. It's an extremely sobering thing to learn amongst the overall unseriousness and wackiness of the DLC at large. It really reminds you how far gone the doctors are and that they need to be contained. After chatting up Mobius, we can finally talk to our brain to hopefully convince him to re-enter our skull so we can finally get out of this whack-ass radar prison. We convince our Stewie Griffin-sounding brain to rejoin us after another comedic and dialogue masterclass from Obsidian.
Well, look who finally dragged themselves in out of the way.
I like how he talks like Stewie Griffin.
Where have we been?
And with our brain in tow, we're ready to confront the think tank. I convince them that I'm the real Dr. Mobius, and I convince the think tank to stay put in their dome and to continue their work on scientific experiments for me and for science, which placates them, allowing the courier to keep the deranged scientists contained and under close supervision, which is probably the best ending we can ask for with these guys. With the story complete, the last thing to touch on is the rest of the map, as the main quest will only take you through a few locations of the Big Empty. This is where the DLC is at its strongest. You can explore to find other research facilities with unique bosses and loot, like the Specimen 72 Cazador or the legendary Blowfly, just to name two, as well as finding remnants of bases and camps left by Elijah and Christine, which tells the tale of Elijah camping out in the Big Empty, being pursued by Christine and injuring her in a battle at a concentration camp, using ghoulified prisoners as walking bombs. The Big Empty is where Elijah found the bomb cars he uses in Dead Money. Elijah then later finding out about the Sierra Madre while in the Big Empty, and some really great examples of environmental storytelling and callbacks to the other DLCs, along with some strong teasers for the final DLC as well. The Big Empty is dense and dangerous, and you won't ever be bored exploring it. And with that, we can say goodbye to Old World Blues and move on to the final DLC of the pack, Lonesome Road. DLC number 4, Lonesome Road. Lonesome Road was the final DLC released and is the penultimate conclusion to the overarching story set up in Dead Money, and focuses on our courier's past and his relationship with another character I've yet to mention, a courier named Ulysses. Although we have never met Ulysses, we hear and see his presence all across both the base game and in the DLCs. Ulysses up to this point has been like a specter that haunts our character. We hear about him often, and he seems to know who we are. Worse yet, he also seems to have a problem with us. In the base game, we learn in Prim that there was originally another courier who was meant to take the platinum chip to Mr. House, but had refused the offer, and left the delivery to us when he spotted our name on the ledger. That courier was our guy Ulysses. Remember the white legs from Honest Hearts, and how they were able to destroy the well-armed settlement of New Canaan? Ulysses was the one to train them and teach them how to use their health-melting guns they're strapped with in Honest Hearts. Remember how I said Elijah learned about the Sierra Madre while in the Big Empty? That's because Ulysses told him about it, as Ulysses was also at the Big Empty Crater around that time, and he had even nursed Christine back to health after her disastrous encounter with Elijah at the concentration camp. We also see his emblem drawn on the walls all around the Big Empty, which are colored markers to denote dangerous areas or areas with loot caches. All Fallout game stories are driven by the fact that the player character is the most capable person on Earth, and their impact is by far the greatest. So I think Ulysses' character as someone who is just as capable and impactful on the world as the player themselves is a really cool idea. Now that we know about our opposition, let's get into it. Lonesome Road sees us heading to the Divide, a geologically devastated area that's fraught with powerful storms, whipping up irradiated sandstorms that cover the landscape. As we play through the expansion, we learn about the history of the Divide and how it became so hellish and devastated. Seriously, this place looks like the warped and destroyed edge of the world where you fight the Soul of Cinder in Dark Souls 3, with impossibly warped and twisted structures strewn throughout the canyons of the Divide, and it looks fantastic. Fallout is no stranger to destroyed cities and architecture, but the devastation of the Divide is on a whole nother level. Buildings jut out from the canyon walls and fallen ruins litter the bottom of it, the verticality of the area giving it a strikingly brutal appearance. The environment artists were cooking on this one. As for how the Divide ended up like this, well, let me tell you the story. Throughout conversations with Ulysses and hearing some tapes he left behind, the Divide was an upstart settlement, in Ulysses' words, a nation taking its first breath. The Divide, even before its destruction, was suffering from massive storms generated by the nearby Big Empty weather control technology. It was kept alive by couriers, specifically our courier, who was vital in transporting supplies to the Divide, braving the harsh storms to support the small settlement. It gave itself the name of the Divide, a reference to its placement between the settled NCR territories to the west and the comparatively unsettled frontier of the eastern Mojave wasteland and beyond. Sometime during this civilization's startup, Ulysses had come to the Divide. Ulysses was a former member of the Twisted Hairs tribe from Dry Wells in Arizona, one of the first tribes to join the at the time upstart Caesar's Legion, serving as scouts for them, and Ulysses was the best scout of them all. Being a skilled survivalist and sharply intelligent, he was able to cross much larger distances in shorter times than any of his peers, cementing himself as a valuable asset. Once the Legion had conquered most of Arizona, however, the Twisted Hairs were betrayed, enslaved, and assimilated into the Legion, with Volpez and Kulta leading the pacification of his home of Dry Wells. Despite this betrayal, Ulysses stayed loyal to the Legion, but changed his name from whatever it was originally to Ulysses, in reference to Ulysses S. Grant, an old world president who, in Ulysses' words, fought during a time of two flags, and he had to make them one, mirroring the current situation between the Legion and the NCR Ulysses found himself in. Ulysses continued working for Caesar, becoming a Frumentari, who were essentially the CIA of Caesar's Legion, who carry out special operations that require subterfuge or infiltration into a faction/society. As a Frumentari, Ulysses operated as a courier and a scout, and was even the first to scout the Hoover Dam and observe the NCR for the Legion, revealing Ulysses' key role in the main conflict of the game. It was around this time that he came across the Divide, and saw hope and potential in it as a possible newer, yet greater civilization that could unite the NCR and Legion into something better, as Ulysses didn't see any long-term hope for either nation. Ulysses, inspired by the pre-war symbols and the tenacity of its citizens, stayed in the Divide hoping to free it of all NCR and Legion influence, as they had both moved into the Divide, the former using it as a vital second trade route from California to the Mojave, and the latter there to destroy said trade route. In a stroke of apocalyptically bad luck, however, the Divide held a dark secret. Beneath the ruins of the Divide were scores of unlaunched nuclear warheads, still active from the Great War. One day, our courier delivered a peculiar package to the Divide, which had been sent there by the NCR due to the package having symbols that matched those found in the Divide. After the courier made his delivery and departed, the package turned out to be a mechanism containing launch codes for the missiles. My bad, guys. The warheads detonated beneath the ground, tearing open a gash in the earth itself. The people of the Divide were obliterated, and the NCR and Legion soldiers were either killed or ghoulified, with the dust storms flaying their skin, turning them into the jerky-skinned marked men we fight throughout this expansion. Ulysses was severely injured, and would have died if he wasn't saved by medical iBots who had also reactivated alongside the nukes, healing him because of the American flag emblem he had painted on his duster jacket, the robots believing him to be an American soldier. After healing, Ulysses blamed us for what happened to the Divide, blaming us for killing the only bastion of hope he saw in the wasteland. Ulysses, believing us to be dead and unsure of what to do next, returned to Caesar, who then sent him as an emissary to Salt Lake City to help the Whitelegs destroy New Canaan. At some point during this campaign, the Whitelegs, who had begun to revere Ulysses for showing them how to use and maintain weapons, showed him that they had begun twisting their hair into dreadlocks like him. This was a nuclear black pill for Ulysses to swallow, seeing it as a disgusting imitation, as they only did it to copy him, and did not know the history of the braid's significance to his tribe. Now disillusioned completely with the Legion, Ulysses left Caesar's service after the New Canaan campaign and began wandering the wasteland to try to find a way to, quote, wake America up, which led him to the Big Mountain and later back to the Divide after finding out that we had survived the destruction of the Divide, returning there to set up a final meeting between the two couriers, which is where the DLC starts us out. We enter the Divide from the mountain passage and get a glimpse of the cracked gash in the earth of the Divide from a distance and enter an old missile silo. We explore the silo and find an Eddie eyebot that we can activate, and the DLC has already contradicted itself. This so-called Lonesome Road, but you get a companion within the first 10 minutes. Not very lonesome if you ask me. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, this is Eddie, very similar to the base game Eddie, but he can activate commissary terminals for you to trade with, which are lifesavers for ammo and armor in this DLC. He can also be upgraded from looting destroyed eyebots that provide several tiers of pretty helpful perks that can transfer back to the base game Eddie once the DLC is complete. Eddie also provides some extra lore by playing back some recordings from Enclave scientists that provide a surprisingly compelling story for this little eyebot in his journey back home. This is probably my favorite companion in any of the DLCs, providing much needed combat assistance for us along with those sweet perks. But for now, we continue through the silo, which is a really cool start to the DLC, as the silo is angled a bit from all the devastation, and there's this cool moment with the silo doors opening to reveal a large nuclear missile being worked on by an eyebot. Once we exit the silo, Ulysses calls us up from Eddie, and we first get to talk to him. Ulysses, following the trend set by the other DLCs, does a great voice performance. His gruff voice and vague musings about what happened and what his plans for us are great, and work well to keep us motivated to learn more about the Divide and to finally meet him face to face. My only complaints about Ulysses' writing and motivations come from the want to learn more about his motivations. Ulysses is hell-bent on his revenge mission because of how devastating the loss of the Divide was, and I wish we could learn more about the Divide and what it was doing, and why Ulysses saw so much hope in it. And unfortunately for us, all we learn about it is from hearsay after it already gotten fucked up. Not only that, but his beef with our player character is pretty one-sided. Ulysses blames us for the destruction of the Divide, but he would have to realize that the destruction was unintentional, and we even tell him so. But nothing we can say will convince him until we actually meet him in the end, which is a tad disappointing. Bro just simply has a bone to pick with us. Once out of the silo, Lonesome Road's gameplay really kicks off. Lonesome Road is a sort of inverse of Dead Money, where Dead Money was a stripped-down, methodical, survival-based expansion that retooled Fallout's game mechanics. Lonesome Road is a full-force, late-game combat challenge that embraces the core Fallout mechanics. This mod will have you scrapping with only the nastiest enemies in the entire game. You'll fight Deathclaws, the new Marked Men enemy faction, who are ghouls from both NCR and Legion survivors of the nuclear disaster at the Divide and banded together to survive. They wear tough armor and wield only the strongest late-game weapons, such as brush guns and anti-material rifles, and most annoyingly the missile launchers. They're as tough as any human enemy can get in the game. You'll also encounter a new mysterious creature species called the Tunnelers, small, black, bioluminescent humanoid creatures that were discovered when the bombs tore open the Earth, exposing them to the surface for the first time. These little fuckers are like little miniature Deathclaws, lunging at the player to deal massive melee damage and can take some serious punishment too, even for the lowest tier of Tunneler. Ulysses fears they may pose an existential threat to the Mojave, and I agree, the Mojave Wastelanders will be a cooked product trying to fight these things. Your enjoyment of Lonesome Road will come down to how well you enjoy the combat of the game, as well as how prepared you are. Lonesome Road is by far the most linear of the DLCs, with very little side content outside of collecting Ulysses' logs in the endgame Courier's Mile area and the possible NCR and Legion endgame areas, depending on your choices at the end of the DLC. You travel through the devastated Hopeville, fight Deathclaws and Marked Men on the overpass, and there's a cool moment where you can see Ulysses lurking and stalking you from a ruined building. You fight Blade, shoot off a nuke for shits and giggles, and fight probably the most difficult encounter in the game. Fighting tunnelers on a small confined mining platform while explosions are rocking the shit out of your camera and character. And you can't open your inventory when you're shaking like this, by the way. Very epic feature. But with my guy Randall's stick, the medicine stick, and some pro gameplay, we power through. Our reward for making it through this tough sequence being the privilege to throw hands in the demonically named Cave of the Abaddon, where you fight, you guessed it, more tunnelers. But I did enjoy very much blowing the dome off of that tunneler queen. After exiting the cave, Ulysses hijacks Eddie and commands him to return to Ulysses' temple, as Eddie contains launch codes just like our package did when we fucked the Divide up originally, and we had unwittingly delivered him right to Ulysses. We do some more fighting, icing some Deathclaws and more Marked Men along the way. I also took on the Deathclaw boss Rar, Honest Heart's coming in clutch again, using the compliance regulator to freeze his ass in place and take him down, as I'd be fucking mincemeat without it, as Rar can kill you with only a light caress. After killing Rar and doing a small amount of exploring for some cool ass riot armor, it's finally time to confront Ulysses and end our long journey. After picking up Eddie again, no little buddy left behind, we enter the heart of Ulysses' temple, and the entrance is awesome. We finally see Ulysses, back turned to us like a true Vlone soldier. Eyebots pass overhead as a nuclear missile rises up behind a flag draped across twisted metal beams and sets in place to launch. It's great. It's one of the best scenes in all of New Vegas. We speak with Ulysses and we find out his plan. He wants to bombard the NCR with the remaining nukes still in the Divide, believing the NCR to be a shallow imitation of the old world with no knowledge of the history to learn lessons from it, and is doomed to fail. And as such, Ulysses believes it must be destroyed in nuclear fire. This encounter can end in one of two ways. You either fail to convince Ulysses and have to fight him to the death, or you can convince him to back down and see the light. The latter being no question the better option. You convince him by telling him that even though the Divide was lost, if it's something he truly believes in, it can be rebuilt. Seeing the light and ascended logic and reasoning of our courier, we then team up to fight off the marked men that are now invading his temple. This part is just great. Ulysses liquefies these ops like it's nothing, and fighting alongside him as an equal is a great moment, and is a bit more cinematic and exciting than it is actually challenging. But I prefer it this way after all the build-up across this DLC and all the others. Once the fight is over, you can then choose to disarm the nukes, or fire them off at the Legion, NCR, or both. This can be pretty funny after talking down Ulysses from launching the nukes, and then he just has to stand there helplessly as you launch them anyway. Nuking the NCR or the Legion will unlock either the Long 15 or the Dry Wells areas, which are endgame areas that are irradiated, full of strong enemies that can regenerate health, but contain unique armor sets and lots of ammunition. They're both similar to the aforementioned Courier's Mile, and the areas are all pretty short, just involving clearing out the enemies and then looting the places for piles of loot. But I appreciate the late game challenge they introduce. And with that, that's all the Fallout New Vegas DLC is complete. I've given my overview and thoughts on each, so now let's rank these bastards. In rank 4 and in last place, we got Honest Hearts. Despite the amazing backstory set up in the awesome location of Zion National Park, Honest Hearts is unfortunately the most undercooked DLC of the bunch. Joshua Graham is an amazing character with some amazing dialogue and quotes, but we don't actually get too much out of him. We mostly just help him with the current situation. We can't really pick his brain too much about his time with the Legion and what it was like for him, and when his quest completes, he vanishes from the DLC completely. The quests are bare bones and mostly unengaging outside of a few select instances, and it really seems like by the time the dev team had completed the Zion game world, they had run out of development time, and only had time to put in simplistic quests and limited characters and dialogue. Despite these issues, the DLC exclusive weapons are some of the best in the game, and they help me greatly through the rest of the DLCs. Shout out the Survivalist Rifle, Compliance Regulator, and Light Shining in Darkness. That and the incredible survivalist story that you can discover by exploring Zion really save it from being a mediocre to just a plain bad expansion. You're teasing me, Joshy. You gave me just a taste when I wanted the whole load. And that's why I give Honest Hearts the 4th rank in this list. Rank number 3, and in 3rd place we got Lonesome Road. Despite my love for the Divide and Ulysses, Lonesome Road is at number 3, as it really suffers from its linearity. Outside of the main quest of the DLC, and the endgame nuked areas in the Courier's Mile, there's almost nothing to speak of. No other side quests to do or NPCs to meet. This is simply an affair between you and Ulysses. And a little bit of Eddie on the side. And even though he has a rich backstory and some great dialogue all throughout the DLC, his motivations still fall a bit flat. His unforgiving attitude towards the Courier is unwarranted, as even he should know that the Courier did not intend to purposely destroy the settlement they have both grinded so hard to build up. And his plan to start another nuclear apocalypse is suicidal madness that'll do far more harm than good, which would fly directly in his plan's face when Ulysses' goal is to create a better society for the wasteland that can surpass both the Legion and NCR. And that will be hard to do with further nuclear devastation and less people around. Besides those issues, along with some minorly frustrating combat, looking at the tunneler mine elevator mosh pit especially, the combat is mostly pretty great, serving as an appropriately challenging endgame combat gauntlet. Great environment designs and deep lore do a lot of good for this DLC, and the Divide is just on a whole nother level when it comes to effectively showing massive destruction, in a game all about massive destruction. The verticality of the damage is just incredible. And despite some minor story issues and a lack of extra content, Lonesome Road is still a very effective send-off to the New Vegas DLCs and their stories. Rank number 2, and in 2nd place we got Dead Shmoney. Boasting the best story and atmosphere of all the DLCs, Dead Money is a great and unique take on the Fallout formula. I give it major props for trying to do and be something completely new, trying to pull off a Silent Hill or Bioshock type experience within the Fallout game engine. And most of the time, it works and is very effective. It has great characters and writing, which is pretty much a given for all these expansions. The world feels dangerous and imposing without feeling too frustrating or overbearing, for the most part. The tight design and seamlessly cohesive narrative will keep you hooked, delivering some of the most engaging and solemn stories ever told in a Fallout game. And its themes are not only reflected in the characters, but also in the gameplay itself, when you try to rob the vault only to realize you can't have it all. Just an excellent moment. I'd probably rank it at number 1 if not for the overusage of traps and hazards towards the end of the expansion, the DLC's only real flaw in my opinion. By the time I got to the vault area, I just said fuck those traps, and just ran past any holograms I saw and trialed and errored my way through the radio sections. I was stuck for a little bit towards the end, and that did no favors for the DLC. But besides that, this DLC is a great package. Well done, Obsidian. Finally, number 1 in the best of the pack, we got Old World Blues. It's just the most complete package out of the bunch. God tier writing, God tier voice acting and performances, the dense and extremely creative world of the Big Mountain, great weapons, and a surprisingly gripping narrative despite the non-seriousness of it all wrapped into one big love letter to classic sci-fi. It's not surprising why this DLC is so revered. My only issues with it being the aforementioned repetitive quest design for some quests, as well as the enemy gank squad attack strategy becoming a bit much at times. But besides those issues I have, this DLC is everything you love out of New Vegas. There's tons of stuff to find, bosses to fight, and lore to uncover. Overall, just a sturdy DLC, and my pick for the best out of the bunch. And there you have it. There's my ranking for all the DLCs, and that's all just my opinion. If you have a different ranking, please let me know in the comments. If Lonesome Road is better than Dead Money for you, I want to hear about it. I'm writing this currently, and this video is like an hour and 10 minutes long. Jesus Christ, longer than I thought. But so I just hope it's not too annoying and boring and overdrawn. Yeah, but we'll see. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.